The Andycine C7 Lite. It can display a 4K video feed up to 60 frames per second. It's not a 4K monitor. Those pixel dimensions are 1920 by 1200. But if you're working in 4K, you don't need to dumb down your HDMI output. Let's take a deeper look. The C7 Lite is one of Andycine's mid-range offerings. You've got a couple of monitors in the C5 line and a couple in the C6, both of which are smaller and cheaper. And then you've got the C7 Lite and the C7. The main difference between these two is the brightness and the weight, though there are a few smaller upgrades as well with the C7. One of the first things that stood out for me with this unit was just how many different options you have for powering it. Okay, well, maybe that wasn't the first thing that stood out. Andycine seems to have made it a point to give you everything that you need to get started. The C7 Lite comes with a shade, swivel mount, multiple power cables, an HDMI to micro cable, and a decent case, even a battery. They want you to be able to plug it right in and start working. But the triple power inputs, NPF battery, DC, USB-C ports was a nice surprise. Having multiple power options is important to me because I dislike having a battery on my monitor unless it's absolutely necessary for size or wire issues. You can also power through to another device with an 8-volt DC output port. So you can power that wireless transmitter straight from the monitor itself, or power your camera or a wireless follow focus. And if that's not power crazy enough, this little piece here on the back is a dummy NPF battery. It can power another device that runs on NPF. The touchscreen is responsive. It consistently brings up the menu with a double tap. It also has some shortcuts built in. Swipe up from the bottom and you've got a menu where you can tap on and off certain functions. It saves 2 tap steps, and the icons are slightly bigger and easier to hit than the regular menu. It's actually surprisingly convenient and increases the usability of the monitor substantially. You can also slide up and down on the left side of the monitor to increase or decrease the brightness, and slide up and down on the right side to raise or lower your volume. Like your phone, 2 fingers can pinch in to zoom, which is a nice feature, but also the first and maybe only drawback of the OS, you always zoom into the center of the screen, regardless of where you pinched, which results in a pinch and then a separate motion to drag and then a pinch again, and it zooms and pulls back always towards the center. I hope this gets addressed in a firmware update because the operation is otherwise bang on. You can also zoom in so far that the image starts to blur. You're way past 400% at that point, and the pixels just aren't there. I kind of wish that they had limited the zoom more tightly, because with a pinch action, it's easy to go too far and then end up wondering if you're out of focus, and then you have to zoom back out again. The monitor comes with all the features that we've come to expect. Assists of all kinds, histograms, parade, vectorscopes, peaking, as well as the ability to load LUTs via the SD card slot. It even sneaks into slightly higher end features like de-squeezing anamorphic. Most of the assists are adjustable, and by that I mean you can set the zebra levels and the peaking intensity or colors. The design is nicely sleek, with the top and bottom bezels being razor thin and the side bezels are quite contained. It's a good-looking monitor. The build is where the budget-oriented choices appear. The glass appears quite nice. If you take the protective film off, the screen becomes a fingerprint magnet, so I'd actually suggest leaving it on. I took mine off to test whether it changed the responsiveness of the screen, and it really doesn't. Once off, it's not going back on again, so make your choice and live with it. The plastic body does not feel especially robust. This is not designed to take any knocks. You don't want to crank it back by holding the top either if you've tightened your monitor holder too much. You'll see the plastic start to separate from the glass. But it's in step with its competitors at this price point. You're not going to find a metal body or especially durable plastic for under $300. It doesn't feel especially like Andycine has tried to get a leg up on the competition in this area. Instead, they've focused on getting all of the features and conveniences that they can into the monitor without ballooning the price. At 1920 by 1200 pixels, the monitor is pretty sharp. At a viewing distance of 15 inches, it matches the visual resolution of a retina display, which is just a hyped up way of saying that it's impossible to discern the individual pixels. If you're wondering how I got to that number, there's a nifty little calculator here. 500 nits is the absolute minimum for viewing in my opinion. And here we run into the second drawback of the budget monitor. And it's true of really all budget monitors. It's just that the brightness isn't there. The C7 Lite seems to lose contrast at its brightest setting, and the contrast and saturation settings do little to improve the image. The included shade doesn't seem to help much either. Problem seems to be the overall amount of brightness it has to compete against. It performs really well indoors, and it does actually fairly well outdoors in the shade. But once you move into the sun, you start having problems with the overall amount of light and the reflections. It's actually the reflections off of the screen that are the most problematic. They're really a bit of a killer here in terms of being able to see what you're doing. This isn't too much of a surprise because after all, you purchased the C7 Lite, so you made a budgetary choice for 500 nits. The C7 offers 2,200 nits, which is double that of the Ninja 5. As far as I know, 500 nits is pretty much all you're going to find at this price point. While brightness and the ability to take a few knocks are important qualities for me, I have to admit that I was fairly impressed with the C7 Lite. It's a monitor that I want to take with me, even if I have to treat it with a little extra care. And that's because the touch interface is easy to use and intuitive. I don't want to have to think about my monitor while I'm on set, how to get to a certain function or how to touch it just right. The USB-C power port is perfectly positioned for my personal power options. It's easy to use and the ability to output power to another device is a plus. It's also larger and easier to use than my Ninja 5, and for indoor shoots, I kind of prefer it. You get a bigger image without any of the drawbacks. Outdoors, you'll probably find yourself staring at your camera's LCD instead of the C7 Lite. There are actually, though, plenty of times when you need a monitor just for indoor work. If you use a 2-camera interview setup, for example, or shoot conferences and events. But if you need an everything monitor, I'd consider the C7 Regular for the better daylight performance.